Starting with the Canadian papers. What are
That's
they saying?
right, Stephen. This certainly is a big story in the Canadian papers. The Globe and Mail, first of all, wonders, what is Wallonia's deal? Why in the world have they decided to scrap this deal that was 7 years in the making? First of all, what in the world is Wallonia? Well, if you're not uncertain about that, do read this article. It gives a good description of just how Wallonia has emerged as the would-be slayer of this massive free trade deal. It's less about what's in the agreement than internal European politics, according to this article. Another opinion piece in the Globe and Mail, it says that, Canada is right to be furious, and it actually accuses EU leaders of being hypocritical for acting surprised. They are partially responsible for this disaster, according to the Globe and Mail. On trade, the EU needs to step up, and Canada needs to move on if ever it doesn't work out.
Flo, it's a big story in Belgium as well, isn't it? How are the papers there reacting? Well,
there's a very interesting editorial in Le Soir, the Belgian paper, that says that this CETA crisis is much more of a European-Canada crisis. It's a Belgio-Belgian crisis. The whole situation has once again revealed deep divisions within Belgium. First of all, you have those that support Wallonia as a small enclave that's fighting the man and heartless multinationals. And then you have those that think that Wallonia is actually an arrogant thorn that is really harming Belgian companies, isolating the country further. It's Belgium's grim reaper. And so this editorial says the crisis has revealed that Belgium is, in fact, two countries that are very divided.
OK, let's move on to something completely different. News coming out of Cameroon. Papers there continuing to react to the train that derailed, in fact, on Friday, leaving scores of people dead there.
That's right. La Nouvelle Expression interviewed a journalist who survived that crash, Patrick Goldman. He gives a very interesting first-hand account, describes how the train was overcrowded, so much so that they added 8 extra carriages. He also says the train was traveling way too fast. It's a miracle that he survived. Now, officially, about 79 people died in this derailment. But he says, you can see it here in this quote, there were hundreds of dead people, so quite a different account there. If we take a look at the official Cameroonian paper, the Cameroon Tribune, they have a very, very measured way that they're talking about this. This article I pulled out, for instance, is focusing on the president, Paul Biya, and how he's reacting, his response, and how he's trying to comfort the nation as best he can. You can see a nation that's in mourning. Yesterday was a day of national mourning in Cameroon.
A lot of the papers outside of Cameroon are being a lot more critical, aren't they? Some saying that the authorities here are partially responsible, at least.
That's right. You really have to go outside of Cameroon to get this kind of criticism. I pulled out a paper from Lugeli, that's a paper from Guinea-Conakry, that says that for now, the government is saying it's not responsible, but the truth is the state as a whole is responsible for several reasons. First of all, this article says it's too weak. For instance, it let CamRail, the rail operator, do whatever it wants. For instance, adding these 8 extra carriages that seem to have been somewhat of a cause for the crash. That's completely irresponsible, according to the Jelly. And the reason why so many people were taking the train and putting pressure on CamRail to add these carriages is because the roads in Cameroon are a total disaster, according to this paper, particularly the road that goes between the 2 biggest cities, Yaoundé and Douala. They're over-congested, and the reason they're so over-congested, the reason so many people want to take the trains is because a strategic bridge on that highway collapsed, and the state hasn't done anything about it. This is irresponsible to leave such a strategic highway such a mess. And this article is very critical of the president, Paul Biya, saying it doesn't seem like he really cares or will be affected by this tragedy.
And Le Monde, here in France, saying the rail network itself may be to blame as well here.
That's right. It's a very interesting article that points out that in 1999, the rail network was privatized in Cameroon, and the operations came under the management of a French group run by Vincent Bolloré. You might be familiar with him. He's a businessman who owns a whole bunch of things, including Canal+. Now, critics say that since the group took over, it's only been preoccupied with making a profit. It hasn't made good on promises that it made when it took over to improve and upkeep infrastructure. Essentially, it hasn't been leaving the actual physical rails in good condition. And this article says this kind of crash just shouldn't happen, given the promises that were made. And you can see this title here. It says, it's time to end the impunity that these kind of multinational companies have.
Going to end with a story about Venezuela. The Vatican has stepped in to try and solve the political crisis there.
That's right. Yesterday, the Pope met with Nicolas Maduro. That's getting a lot of attention. The Spanish papers have been following this story quite well. You can read about it in El País, that says that the Pope, the fact that he's entered he's intervened, has opened the way to some sort of a dialogue. Of course, there's huge tensions in Venezuela. Let's take a look at El Nacional. That's a paper that's quite critical of Nicolas Maduro. Very interesting editorial that says that Venezuela is living under a dictatorship that has dropped its mask. The only way forward for the country is rebellion. No solution but to ignore the regime. No choice but to protest whenever possible. This is the only way to restore the rule of law. So you can see major tensions in Venezuela. It'll be interesting to see if the Pope's intervention will change anything. Of course, the Pope managed to move things along in between Cuba and the United States. Perhaps he'll be able to do something in Venezuela as well.
Fingers crossed. You never know. Thank you very much, Flo Wilmonet and Stephen with Business here on France 24.